Am I Evil by Jack Mangan. Based on Am I Evil by Brian Tatler and Sean Harris, originally released on the album Lightning to the Nations by Diamond Head, 1980. Chapter 1. Yet he made no wild, reckless vow, swore no oath by saints or devils. Men shall die for this, he said coldly. Robert E. Howard, Red Shadows. My mother was a witch. She was burned alive. Smoke curled against the diamond sky, ripples of black above Bones Island. Folds of her long dress smoldered, flakes of soot and ash drifted through the air, falling like hellish autumn leaves. Her head tilted back against the stake, open-mouthed, eyes widening in pain. The halo of red braided petals blackened and curled upon her crown. Roses to bind, flames to cleanse, Bishop Henrik chanted. Set you all alight, now your heresy ends. It was the coldest winter in memory. The 27 elders of Good Village had slayed across the lake with dread purpose, their condemned prisoner bound in thorns and chains. They shivered together now in this woodland clearing, basking in the ceremony heat. My brother's strong arms locked against mine, holding me back while I struggled, our feet slipping in the melting snow. Scarves obscured their expressions, but my brother's eyes were slates, cold contrast against the madness of my grief. Firelight reflections flickered. Shadows danced like pagans into the black island forest. As the drapery of flame enfolded our mother, so rose her hatred, her contempt, her disgust. Not at her murderers, not at her treacherous sons, not cruel fates, gods, or devils. Her scorn was fixed upon me. Spare me your weeping, Vander. My mother's voice rose high and defiant, clear above the din, and over my own raw-throated anguish. Mars, bringer of war, instill your wrath in my worthless sons. Thankless little bitch, for the tears I cried. They were wild with the ecstasy of her burning. An elder named Eugene sounded a whoop through the fire and haze. He'd helped me once years ago with a snarled fishing line, yet here he stood tonight, cheering my mother's immolation. My mother screamed to her soul's destination. Elated shouts rose here and there, lost in the noise. The rising roar and crack of the inferno, pounding of blood in my ears. Cliff, the blacksmith, stood grim-faced and dour at Eugene's side, the stoic contrast to the revelry around him. A new pungence filled my nostrils, a sickening, piquant scent that recalled the festivals following hunting expeditions, cooking meat. I squinted at the heat, no longer able to see my mother's face, only the wavering point atop the stake. A change started inside the fire. An unnatural blue glow began to radiate from within the fiery altar, casting an eerie radiance across the writhing flames. Hairs lifted on my arms and neck. The thrill of static charged the air, an ozone smell against the burning wood and flesh. The cries of triumph turned to alarm. Necromancy! Someone screamed. It's electric! Eugene shouted, his delight become horror. My brother Alve's grip on my left arm loosened. I struck clumsily at Paul on my right. My fist glanced ineffectual off of his shoulder, but still he let go. Eldest brother David behind me, we four remained where we stood, all of us staring slack-jawed. Jagged bolts of blue lashed in all directions from the stake, etching black scores into the trees and the ground at our feet, scorching a hole into the chest of an elder named Janako. Lightning strikes the earth! Lightning to the nations! The crowd began to scatter. Overcome as I was with my own terror and grief, I could not deny the satisfaction that whispered in my mind, watching the elders succumb to their own worst fear. I noticed movement in the woods, someone apart, separate from the 27, a hidden observer beyond the shadowed trees. Rhea, daughter of Adam and Goethe, not an elder. I raised my hand, but she'd already turned and disappeared into the darkness. Eric! Elder Adam called, desperate to reassert command in the clearing. End it! Throughout my childhood, I'd only ever known Eric as the pudgy, pleasant-faced owner of the windmill. I watched now as he stood hesitantly before the dais, drawing his long, tarnished saber from its hilt. My mother's form was a mere silhouette in fire now, writhing with the rapture of death and sorcery. Two of my brothers fled, taken by the same panic that had gripped the rest of the elders. Only David remained, but his hold on me released. Adam was running to and fro in the clearing, red-faced, shouting orders that went mostly unheeded. The others of the 27 were deep into their fright, far beyond reason or understanding. Only one other figure remained in stillness. Only Cliff the blacksmith kept somber and resolute. His eyes slid warily from the fire, swept the scene, locking onto mine. No fear in his face, no alarm, just grim acceptance. I averted my gaze. Adam ran back into view. He seized Eric by the shoulders, shoved him toward the pyre. Do it! Now! Eric stared wide-eyed. For good! He took a furtive step, then rushed ahead. For good! My own paralysis broke. I lunged forward to intercept, but slipped hard to my knees on an icy patch. Orange and blue light glinted on Eric's blade as it led his charge. Serpentine bolts coursed out from the dais, drawn to his steel, surging snake-like across his limbs and torso. Eric's yell changed in timbre. Even as his legs failed, momentum carried the sword tip forward, piercing her ribcage, embedding into the blackened stake upon which she was bound. Eric's cry pitched again to a shriek and was silenced. He let go of the hilt and fell awkwardly aside, face first into the kindling burn. I could see her through the edifice of fire. My witch mother slumped down against the post, held upright now, only by her chains and the impaling sword. The last remnants of sorceress life shuddered before my eyes. Once, twice, once more, and then she was gone. The blitzkrieg abated. As I watched my mother die, I lost my head. Helpless in my rage, my hands clawed in the frozen mud. Tears flowed undammed, icy streaks across my face. A cheer sounded from the elders in the clearing. Their fervor and mania turned circumspect. Triumph become wary relief. It is done, Adam said softly, brushing soot from his pelts. Lilith Harris, the witch, is dead. He stood tall and shouted, Her evil is no more! Bishop Henrik took a place at Adam's right side, casting a baleful downward glance at me. Gerda was radiant with pride at Adam's left, her voice clear and righteous. Brave elders, this night's deed was executed with love. Revenge now I sought. Let us break bread, she continued, clasping Adam's hand in hers. Let us return across the lake to mourn our losses and to celebrate our victory with the commoners of good. I couldn't believe, couldn't accept what I'd just heard. The next moments were a blur of vermilion, anger ascendant. A celebration? You murder my mother and talk of feasts? My voice cracked with fury, pointing at Adam and Gerda. Even David took a step back. The coffin train will come for every last elder of good. I'll see you ride. In the next moment, an axe handle was in my hand. Its blade had easily come free of its perch in the nearby stump. My feet did not slip this time as I charged forward. I'll split you to the bone! My quarry was Adam, but Cliff, the old blacksmith, intercepted. Fury like blinders on me. I'd never expected him to be so fast. He moved with assurance, his rapier swatting the axe from my grasp. His left hand struck my chest, dead center. Now my feet did slip from under me. My tailbone landed hard on the ground. Iron taste of blood. It bit my tongue. The back of my head struck the frozen earth. The world lurched dizzily. Sparks and ash blurred into streaks beneath the blurred sky. I scurried up onto both elbows, nearly impaling myself on the tip of Cliff's rapier. He stood luminous over me, scowling down. The axe was out of reach. I was beaten. Low snickering from elders nearby. Evidently, the witch's evil is passed down to her youngest son, Bishop Henrik said. Dispatch him and throw him onto the pyre alongside her. The flash of fear was not for myself, not for my life, but for the thought of my mother's death going unavenged. An anticipation hush fell over the clearing as everyone watched Cliff's blade. Light ashfall fell upon our scene, as otherwise motionless as a painting. This boy is nothing, Cliff said at last. He kept his sword level, relaxed his arm slightly. Not good, not evil, not a threat to anyone. My eyes never left the steel, but I was aware of Henrik's approach. The words through his clenched teeth. This isn't over until... Nothing is over until she's interred beneath the ice. Cliff's voice was quiet, calm, but forceful enough to shut down the priest. Adam joined them now, the three of them standing over me. I was cold and growing numb. Yes, but will Lilith's corpse stay at the lake bottom? Adam's tone was acidic. His eyes darted back and forth from Henrik to Cliff. Eric lies dead from her sorcery. Why did the rose chains fail to protect us tonight, Bishop? Henrik shrugged, nonchalant. I blessed a double dozen for use in her binding. Perhaps the evil had grown too strong in this witch. Or perhaps Cliff was conflicted and did not tie them properly to her brow. The roses will serve their purpose, Cliff said. Lily will remain below Silence Lake. Fine, said Adam. Henrik, get some men and see that the witch is put into the depths. David, help him with your mother's body. Cliff, you deal with Vander. He spared me a look of disdain, then was away to give further orders. A horse's whinny sounded through my mournful reverie. The wooden pier was far back across the island beach, its columns frozen into the water surface. No boats were tied to it, only the horses that had pulled the fleet of sleds and our prisoner across the Lake Silence ice. The return journey would have 3 fewer passengers. With Adam and the bishop departed, Cliff put his rapier back in its sheath. He extended a hand to help me up, which I ignored. You come with me. There's room in my sledge to get you back across the ice, he said. I'll wait here if you wish to say goodbye. Take her down now. Don't want to see her face, I said. Her blisters and burns can't hide my disgrace. He furrowed his brow, watching me for a long moment. I'm not feeling hungry myself, but I can take you to the feast, if that's your wish. Or, if you'd prefer not to dine with those people, then there's a spare mat in my smithy. You're welcome to stay until morning. I couldn't bear the thought of attending their black celebration. Couldn't go home, not to the room I shared with my brothers, not to our house and its absence of her. Every last elder would answer for my mother's death. This I swore. But for tonight, Cliff's generosity would be accepted. I'd make my residence in his workshop. Take my time. For now. I reached up and took his hand. You're listening to the audiobook of Am I Evil, based on the Am I Evil novella, based on the Am I Evil graphic novel, based on the classic heavy metal song, written and made famous by Diamond Head and famously covered by Metallica, and later covered live by the thrash big four of Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer, and Megadeth. Narration by me, Jack Mangan, the author of the graphic novel and the novella. All the legal stuff here, you can't sell recordings or transcripts of this, blah, blah, blah. We're running an Indiegogo campaign in June 2023 to raise funds to produce high-quality print versions of the Am I Evil graphic novel, with cover art by James F. Beveridge, and all interior comic panel art and lettering by Kyle Burles, aka Biohazard. Please swing over to Indiegogo and support our campaign to receive your own print and or PDF edition of the Am I Evil comic. And the ebook of this novella will also be available separately. Or for purchase information or just general information about Am I Evil, check us out at amievil-graphicnovel.com. See you in Chapter 2, which will probably have a little bit less echo in my voice. We'll see. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Indiegogo supporters.